Constantinople, the greatest city of its time and the gateway to Europe. For centuries, the Muslims had tried and failed to conquer the Christians in their impregnable walled city. If Constantinople were ever to fall, the whole of Europe would be vulnerable. With the roar of cannon fire, the East gave warning to the West that people were no longer safe behind their city walls. In 1453, the Muslims were trying again, and this time with a new weapon. A weapon so powerful that even Constantinople's massive battlements might not withstand the pounding. If the combination of a determined Muslim leader and this fantastic new weapon could break the stalemate, the siege of Constantinople would truly be one of history's turning points. For 800 years, Constantinople was the world's richest city, center of trade, bridging Asia and Europe. When Rome fell to the barbarians in the 4th century, Constantinople took its place as the capital of the great Roman Empire. But 11 centuries later, this once great empire had shrunk to little more than an impoverished city-state. Its new leader, Constantine XI, ruled over a capital that was bankrupt, its lush gardens overgrown, its palaces deserted, and its people dispersed. Yet Constantinople remained the center of the Orthodox Christian Church, while Rome was the center of the Catholic Church. Each were jealous of the other's power and influence. This division was so great that to Rome, the Orthodox Church was an even greater enemy than Islam. What was to follow was a brutal Christian feud. But the city would always remember how the Roman Catholic Crusaders bloodily sacked Constantinople in 1204, when it possessed 2/3 of Europe's wealth. One horrified eyewitness wrote at the time,
"I do not know where to begin the story of what these monsters committed. They broke the holy images. They hurled the sacred relics of the martyrs into unmentionable places. They scattered the body and the blood of the Savior. They seized the chalices and tore out their precious stones and drank from them."
The city never recovered its former glory. By the time Constantine XI inherited the imperial throne in 1449, Constantinople was surrounded by an aggressive enemy. Constantinople had become a Christian enclave in the middle of the Ottoman Empire, which now extended from the Danube to the Euphrates, including Bosnia, Bulgaria, Greece, and Serbia. As early as the 7th century, Muslims had attempted to wrestle the city away from the Christian Byzantine Empire. Ayub Ensari, the Prophet Muhammad's standard-bearer, had died in his attempt to capture the city in 674 AD. The huge walls had withstood wave after wave of attack and proved to be the finest fortress in the world. 800 years after Ayub Ensari's death, another Ottoman Sultan, Mehmet II, declared,
There is only one thing I want. Give me Constantinople.
This ambitious 21-year-old general was determined to ride into the city as its conqueror. Mehmet dreamed of creating an empire even greater than Rome at its height. But his grand vision would not be complete without a majestic capital city. He needed Constantinople. The young sultan was well educated in the arts, languages, and the sciences. He was a man excited by new ideas. He made sure his troops were equipped with the latest weapons. Mehmet wanted to be remembered as the conqueror, the sultan who succeeded where all his forefathers had failed. It was the Emperor Constantine who now stood in his way. Constantine was proud of his inheritance. The city was his life, and he would defend it to the last. Constantine paid gold to his enemies in an attempt to keep the peace. Mehmet watched Constantinople run out of money and refused to renegotiate the terms. In the winter of 1451, he cut off Constantinople's supplies. He built his own massive fortress, the Rumeli Hisar. It had walls 25 feet thick and was completed in only 4 months. From there, Mehmet now commanded the Bosphorus, where the strait is at its narrowest. With this new castle, the Sultan was able to put a stranglehold on Constantinople's shipping, severing the city's lifeline. Ships loaded with Ukrainian grain could not pass the Ottoman cannon. When Mehmet ordered his navy into the Sea of Marmara, the blockade was complete. Constantinople was cut off from the rest of the world. Constantine was desperate. He even approached the hated Catholic Church for military assistance. He sent gifts to the Sultan and promised to increase the gold shipments. Mehmet wasn't interested, but he did offer Constantine a deal: territory in Greece and religious freedom for his population in exchange for the city. Constantine refused. How could he surrender his city and everything that was its heritage? Classical Greece, Rome, and Christianity. His last letter to Mehmet tells it all.
As it is clear that thou desirest more war than peace, I turn now and look alone to God. However, I release thee from all thy oaths and treaties with me, and closing the gates of my capital, I will defend my people to the last drop of my blood.
On April the 6th, the Sultan pitched his red and gold tent outside the city walls. The defenders of the city awoke to a chilling sight as they looked out over the Ottoman camp. They were outnumbered by 10 to 1. At the heart of the Sultan's army was an elite corps of Muslim converts, the Janissaries. These zealously aggressive troops were recruited as children from the Ottoman Empire's most warlike states, Bosnia, Serbia, and Albania, to wage this holy war against Constantinople. Mehmet gave Constantine one last chance. He sent a message under a flag of truce to the city.
I will, as the law commands, spare you, the citizens of this great city, harm neither your families nor your belongings, if you voluntarily surrender to me.
Constantine rejected the ultimatum. Mehmet attacked. Against the odds, Mehmet's troops were turned back. The first victory went to Constantine. Stunned by this defeat, the Sultan was forced to change his tactics. He brought in artillery to destroy the city's massive walls. Most impressive of all was a giant cannon, the largest gun ever made. It was an astonishing 29 feet from muzzle to breech with a 26-inch bore, and fired a half-ton marble cannonball more than a mile. It required 60 oxen and 400 men to use it, and took 2 hours to load. The cannon enabled the Ottomans to fight with the most sophisticated piece of weaponry in the world. More than 60 large cannons were cast in temporary foundries outside Constantinople. An eyewitness wrote,
The assault continued day and night, with no relief from the clashes and explosions. For the Sultan hoped to take the city easily, since we were few against many, by pounding us to death. He allowed us no rest from the attack.
With continuous salvos, the Ottoman cannon breached the wall in several places, but the Byzantines defiantly fought off the assaults and repaired the walls. Mehmet then built a huge siege tower, only to see it burnt to the ground by a small raiding party from inside the walls. 12 weeks into the siege, neither the artillery barrage nor the attacks by the Muslim army had been successful. The Sultan's army was on the point of deserting, and he was forced to rethink his strategy. Until now, he had only been able to attack small sections of the wall that were easily defended. Most of Constantinople was protected by the sea. On the northern side of the city, the Christians had stretched a great chain across the mouth of the Golden Horn, thus blocking access to the city's harbor. Mehmet, in a moment of genius, bypassed the chain by hauling part of his fleet across a narrow stretch of land. Overnight, they brought 30 ships into Constantinople's protected harbor. As dawn broke, the Christians woke to discover that the Ottoman war fleet had surrounded the city. The Christians were devastated, and morale collapsed. But Emperor Constantine stood by his decision to defend his city to the last.
How could I leave the churches of our Lord and the throne in such a plight? What would the world say about me? I pray you, my friends, in future do not say to me anything else but, "Nay, sire, do not leave us. Never, never shall I leave you. I am resolved to die here with you."
But now, completely surrounded, the defenders had to spread themselves along the entire length of the city's walls. It was an impossible task. At this moment, Mehmed used another brilliant tactic. He aimed all his cannons at the same section of the wall. Within a month, the walls began to crumble. With victory in sight, luck also played its part in securing the Ottoman victory. The lost tomb of Eyyub Ensari, friend and fallen disciple of the Prophet Muhammad, was found by two Janissaries close to the city walls. This was taken as a good omen for an Islamic victory. The Christians received different omens. Their tradition held that the city of Constantinople would never fall while the moon was in the heavens. But on the night of the 24th of May, there was a full eclipse of the moon, bringing 3 hours of darkness. An evil omen indeed. 4 days later, shortly after sunset, the last Christian liturgy in St. Sophia began. The emperor arrived just before midnight, and there made peace with God, before returning to his post on the city walls. The prayers continued throughout the night, and the church filled with refugees as the sound of Ottoman artillery grew ever more intense. Christian commander wrote,
"The reports of muskets, the ringing of bells, the clashing of arms, the cries of fighting men, the shrieks of women, and the wailing of children produced such a noise that it seemed as if the earth trembled.
Night gave way to day. Word came that the walls had finally been breached. Soon, the first Ottoman soldiers forced their way into the cathedral, bringing to an end 1,000 years of Roman history. The last outpost of the Roman Empire, Byzantium, had fallen. The victorious soldiers spent 3 days of looting, raping, and killing. Men were butchered, women and children became slaves. Mehmet made his entrance into the city. He went straight to the holiest of the Christian shrines, the Church of the Holy Wisdom, St. Sophia. While a Muslim cleric sang, "There is no God but God," the Sultan proclaimed St. Sophia a mosque. The Roman Empire had come to an end. Emperor Constantine was dead. Where his grave is now is lost to history. However, not far from this church, a headless body was found. The corpse wore purple boots on which the imperial double-headed eagles were embroidered. Many believed that this was Constantine XI, the last Roman emperor who had died defending his city and his people. Perhaps his grave is here. The day after the conquest, Mehmet issued a decree stating that this church should remain a Christian sanctuary forever. Christian Constantinople was renamed Istanbul, the heart of the Ottoman Empire, which proved to be one of the world's most powerful and long-lasting. It survived for over 500 years, until the end of the First World War. The conquest of Constantinople by the Ottomans was a turning point that sent shockwaves throughout the world. The very survival of Christianity in Europe was threatened. The Silk Road was closed. The great trade route to the east was no longer in Christian hands. Europe turned westwards in search of a new route. The age of discovery had begun. The siege of Constantinople started a new era of warfare throughout the world. Mehmet had captured Constantinople with the roar of cannon fire. Since 1453, artillery has been the backbone of every successful army in history.